20 plus rookie wide receiver rankings post NFL Combine. So much has changed. People have rose, people have fallen. Let's get straight into it with your first tier, if anything's have changed.
Yeah, no, tier 1 hasn't changed at all. I have Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors here.
Fair.
And, Benaki, when I first did that back in December, it was not consensus. But I don't know about you. It feels like it's starting to become more of like an accepted opinion by the community. Do you feel that way as well? Because I felt like I was backed against a wall there for a second to begin this.
I think that it doesn't. I think it's whatever is your taste.
Sure.
It's not that I'm against it still. I think I'm more accepting to it. I still just don't have him in the same tier. That's what I like.
Okay.
I think Marvin Harrison is still alone for me. And that's no disrespect on Malik Neighbors.
Sure.
I think that's just where I view Marvin Harrison Jr. currently. And that could easily change once we're in the NFL because anything can happen. And maybe Malik Neighbors is more successful than Marvin Harrison Jr. So,
I wholeheartedly believe there are things that Malik does better than Marvin Harrison Jr. We've talked about that. I believe he's a more explosive athlete. We didn't get to see either of these guys test at the combine, so we won't really know for sure. I think he's a more explosive athlete. I think he's better after the catch. But both very good prospects, elite prospects, both guys that I would say are Jamar Chase level prospects, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, look, I think both of these guys are going to be top tier wide receivers in fantasy. So I completely agree when it comes down to the pathway of success, when it comes down into fantasy, which is what we all are excited about clearly. I agree in that sentiment here. So take us to your tier 2.
All right, tier 2 has taken shape and it got smaller after the combine. Just so everyone is aware, the testing accounts for about 10% of our scouting grades. I do think in a vacuum, the Dynasty community way overreacts to testing. We'll talk about that throughout this video. But I do think that Rome Odunze really separated himself from anyone else in that wide receiver 3 category, as if he hadn't already. But he officially... What did Rome weigh in at here? Officially weighed in at 6'2", almost 6'3", pretty much, 212. So no surprise there. That's kind of around the size we were anticipating, 6'3", 212.
Yeah.
And has a pretty good day. 4.45, 40-yard dash. The 10-yard split is in the 93rd percentile at a 1.52. Those numbers at 6'2", 212 are very impressive. Pretty good vertical jump. Good shuttle all around. I think he had a very impressive combine. The issue is, and this is a reoccurring theme in this video, I promise you, is that everyone in this class tested so well that names like Odunze aren't being discussed as huge winners from the draft. But to me, he locked and loaded himself inside the top 10 of the NFL draft with this kind of performance. And you think about how the combine went last year. If Odunze did this last year, people would be like, oh my, that is so impressive. But, records were broken this year. Everyone went crazy. Everyone ran well. A 4.45 for Odunze, very impressive. My comps since day one have been Cortland Sutton, Chris Olave, T. Higgins. Mash them guys together. That's what you're getting in Rome Odunze.
And look, I completely agree. What it's going to be happening for these guys is that you don't hear them getting talked all too much going into the NFL. You hear about them, but you're not going to understand why they're not getting too much recognition. So I completely agree in that sentiment. I would say this, oddly enough, after the combine, for me, I think Rome Odunze solidified himself within that top 10 on the NFL draft. Not saying that he wasn't there already or there wasn't already talks about that. I think that there was still that room and gap that he can fall outside the top 10. And I feel like he solidified himself there going into after the NFL Combine with that performance. Big body wide receiver that can clearly move, which is also really phenomenal. So much good things coming out of multiple teams camping. I think you hear that with all these teams and all these players, about all these players saying, great guy, very personable. And I think that's really what the NFL Combine is for. So these GMs can get in front of these players, shake their hand, understand who they are as a person, because they've seen the tape.
all
Yeah,
that. The testing is really a third factor. It
exactly.
matters, but not to the point where the Dynasty community thinks it does.
Yeah, completely agree here. So yeah, love Rome Odunze in tier 2. I've been already seeing in the comments that Rome Odunze should potentially be in tier 1
Yeah, I
with
don't
Marvin
agree there,
Harrison Jr.
but
and Malik Neighbors. I completely
I
agree.
do
I don't
think it
agree.
makes that top 6 of Superflex drafts a lot more enticing. Top
Yeah.
3 of one quarterback a lot more enticing.
Completely agree here. All right, take us to your tier 3. This one should be
All right.
interesting.
Yeah, so tier 3 was a little bit bigger before the combine. Again, that 10% did matter in our scoring grades, and there's only one player in my tier 3 now for the wide receivers that is Brian
Okay.
Thomas Jr. He comes in now. I believe he was listed at 6'4" before the combine. He comes in similar to Odunze, 6'2" and 7/8, really 6'3". Like that is
Yeah.
pretty much 6'3".
Exactly.
Weighs in at 209 pounds and has one hell of a day. One hell of a day at 6'3", 210, runs a 4.33 40-yard dash. That's in the 99th percentile. Explosion grade was up there. Great broad jump, good vertical jump. We said this before the combine, Badaki, that there are certain players we have been talking up athletically, and they had a lot to lose rather than really to gain. At the combine, we felt like Brian was one of those names. Freak athlete. We kept talking about how he moved so fluidly.
Yeah.
And he came and pretty much dominated the combine, and for me, solidified himself as the only guy in that tier 3. And again, making the 107, 108, 109, and Superflex leagues a lot more enticing.
Yeah, look, what he did was pretty phenomenal. The second fastest 40 time amongst wide receivers, clearly behind Xavier Worthy with that 4.21. But yes, Brian Thomas solidifies himself to be a top 8 pick in your rookie drafts. I think we've seen a lot of, up and down, the rookie mock draft, I guess, ADP fluctuating when it comes down to Brian Thomas. We see a lot of people not loving him, a lot of people all in on him. And I think this just puts him within that spot. Yeah. If you have 6, 7, 8, the 106 through the 108, I think you can feel really happy of getting Brian Thomas right within that middle part of the NFL draft, who we thought was going to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft since we scouted him. And now I think he 100% solidified himself.
Top 15.
Yeah.
He could go top 12. I mean, look, he is not a finished product yet. And I think that is the reason why some people in the Dynasty community are nervous. He is not a finished product like Odunze, Marvin, Neighbors. There is a lot to work on with his route tree. He needs to improve his release package. He really worked off of 3 main routes. It wasn't like a whole bag he was diving into pretty consistently. But from the athletic ability, the hands, he had an 82.1 catch percentage, which was 3rd best in the nation, 60% contested catch rate. What he can do after the catch, how he can block from day one, how fluid he is. I think there is a huge range of outcomes, and for him to test that way, he's going to be locked and loaded top 15, top 20. My comps were AJ Brown and Quan Bolden. I think those hold up today still as we sit here.
Yeah, completely agree. I'll throw Michael Pittman in that one as well.
I like that.
So, yeah, love Brian Thomas. Makes sense why he stands alone here. And
Michael Pittman, that's a good one because Michael Pittman grew as a route runner. He was not the route runner he is today coming out.
Yeah.
So that took a little time.
Yeah, it definitely did.
I like it.
Tier 4, let's go through it.
This is where things get funky. And just before we get into tier 4, Badaki and I want to let you know about something very exciting that is coming on March 8th. On March 8th, we are releasing version 3 of our 2024 rookie report. You can check out an example of V1 here from Marvin Harrison Jr.'s profile. And now you can see what we added in V2. All these profiles, all these new additions. Yep. Imagine what V3 has in store. If you want to dive in deep in this rookie class, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, if you want to learn more about every position, dive deep into these sleepers, full profile breakdowns, then use a promo code LAND, become a Mother Flocker member, and you will unlock that on March 8th, as well as a live Dynasty team review of your choice. Okay, tier 4. Things get funky here.
Okay, I'm listening.
I believe the Dynasty community wants me to lower this player in my rankings, and I'm personally not ready to do so. Troy Franklin would still be the next name I would mention here. But I will acknowledge that tier 4 is one of the larger tiers, and it's completely fluid for me at this point until the NFL draft. That includes Troy, Ladd McConkey, the Texas boys, Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, and still my favorite sleeper in the class is Jalen McMillan. And I can't lie to you, I am absolutely in love with the fact that no one is talking about Jalen McMillan because a lot of my sleepers were taken away from me. Ladd McConkey was my sleeper back in December. Brian Thomas. There's a couple other names we'll talk about in tier 5 that a lot of people love at this point. But no one is talking about Jalen McMillan, and I am excited that no one is because at least I'll get, a sleeper that doesn't have any hype from the community. But this is a big tier. Who do we want to talk about first?
I think we need to know, or you definitely know who we need to talk about. That's Troy Franklin. Runs in at a 4.41 in the 40 time. If you guys watched our live stream, so much has happened. He comes in at 6'1", 176 pounds, and I think that's where we felt the disappointment. At least I felt the disappointment. He was my wide receiver 4B behind Brian Thomas Jr. You also see the 10-yard split, at the 4.31, which is not the best either when you think of his size specifically. I don't think this changes what Troy Franklin did in college. I don't think it's going to change who he's going to be. I think his eyes and his values has dropped from NFL teams going into this draft, right? All season or leading up to the NFL Combine, I think we would have said that Troy Franklin, in my opinion, for me specifically, I don't know, I don't want to speak for Zach at the moment, but for me, he kind of felt like he was a locked-in back of the half wide receiver 1 in the NFL draft. Now I feel really confident that he is not going in the first round, which doesn't necessarily affect him once again as a player, but it really affects where he goes because Troy Franklin was somebody that we viewed as going to the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen, going to the Kansas City Chiefs with a Patrick Mahomes, going to insert elite quarterback to now that kind of changes depending on his draft capital. Still a great player. I love what he did. I think it's very underwhelming when you think of how good this class was, in my opinion. So take us through it. That's what I had to say.
I'm sorry. I just don't agree.
That's fair.
The first thing you mentioned is you were shocked and surprised at his weight. I mean, I don't know. I feel
not
like
his weight specifically.
I said
I meant his 40. Sorry. I didn't mean to say his weight. Okay. I said I was shocked that he ran that 40. I was hoping him being in the 3s with that weight, not in the 4.4s. Yeah, but sorry, continue.
I just think these numbers are so if it was a 4.39, it's different then?
I would say,
you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't.
I think so.
I don't understand why that matters. Look, to me, I'll talk about how he weighed in at 176. If you go back and watch any of our wide receiver ranking videos, if you go back and hear me talk about Troy Franklin at any point from December until present, I told y'all he did not play at 187. He was listed at 187. I said, I promise you, he is around 175. He weighs in at 176. That did not personally surprise me. We talk about him running a 4.41. Again, I just think it's ridiculous. You look at wide receivers last year who were very successful in the NFL, Jaden Reed, Tank Dell, the likes of Jordan Addison. We've talked about this before. None of those guys even ran a 4.41. They weren't close to a 4.41. So if he runs 0.2 seconds faster at a 4.39, everything's changed. I just don't personally agree. I do get that he will probably drop down draft boards. I agree that he's probably not a locked and loaded first round pick. But I kind of love it because I believe in rookie ADP he's going to fall. And all of a sudden I have another sleeper in the second round that I really love. Everyone is absolutely obsessed with the yards per route run metric. They love it. They think it's super predictive. Puka Nacua was super high last year in yards per route run. That is the biggest number people are looking at that they think is predictive of production in the NFL.
Right.
Troy Franklin is one of 3 wide receivers in this class to post over 3 yards per route run in a single season. The only other 2, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. This is an example, and I said this beforehand, of me personally believing that the Dynasty community is way overreacting to testing. It does not matter as much as people think. I promise you, in fact, I implore you, if that's the right word to use, to go look at the top 15 wide receivers in fantasy scoring in the last 10 years and check out their RAS scores. Check out what they did at the Combine. It happens every single year. I say it every single year. Do not overvalue testing numbers. Do not change your rankings drastically because of testing numbers. So I understand Troy didn't do well at the gauntlet, but personally, I'm still going to rely on the tape. I'm still going to rely on the production, the early breakout, all these signs that point towards future production in the NFL. And I'm willing to move him down my rankings. I'm willing to put Adonai Worthy Lad all ahead of him. If the draft capital is there, if they're all first round picks and he's not. But at the moment, I just don't believe that this is, and it reflects in my scouting grades, I don't believe this is a reason for me to drastically move Lad down or Troy Franklin down.
Yeah. And I think what changes my perspective is, I have to know what the context of this class. I think we've seen the size specifically out of this class and how fast they ran. And the fact that Troy Franklin didn't run within that size.
See, that I just don't agree with. There will be plenty of players.
I think that's underwhelming. I
just don't agree, but that's fine. I mean, look, there will be plenty of players in this class, Badaki, who tested incredibly, and they will not produce in the NFL.
Yeah. And
it just does not matter to me that much.
100%. I think that, I just think for me, if I'm seeing, which once again doesn't change his value where I believe he what he's going to do in the NFL. I just think that he's viewed differently now. Personally, I don't think that coming into the NFL draft for NFL GMs, not like for anyone else. I'm just thinking about the NFL GMs. I'm looking at Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, Tez Walker, Roman Wilson. I'm pretty sure ran fast. Lama Conklin. All these guys are heavier, specifically, like probably about 10 pounds heavier, and if I'm not mistaken, around the same height, or maybe a little bit shorter. Maybe he came in at 5'1", maybe they're 6 foot, 5'11", and they still ran, in my opinion, faster than him. And I think that changes the dynamic for those NFL teams. I still like Troy Franklin. The only person I moved ahead of him in my ranking specifically is Ladd McConkey. I think he solidifies himself to potentially being in the first back end of the NFL draft. I mean, it's a real, excuse me, it's really only 2 spots, or technically 1 spot in my rankings that I moved him, so it's not a drastic change. Yeah. I just think of the NFL GMs thinking about Troy Franklin, looking at what he did at that combine and saying that's a bit underwhelming when you look at the list of names in front of them.
I just don't agree. I mean, you put him in last year's class. Zay Flowers ran a 4.42. I thought that was a fantastic number. Tyler Scott, who can stretch the field, ran a 4.44. Jaden Reed, a 4.45. You look at the names of guys like Jordan Addison. We know he was in the 4.9s. Rashee Rice was a 4.51. He's not stretching the field, but was that number disappointing? I know he's a heavier player. I don't know. I think like that 40-yard dash, because it's the most exciting thing for us in Dynasty to look at. It's just way overvalued in my opinion.
Sure.
I'll say this. There are way more players in the NFL who produce at high volumes that are not in the 4.3s or lower. Go look historically. Last 10 years. I guarantee you that number, if you were to average it, is around 4.45.
And that's fine.
4.47.
I'm not disappointed. I'm not like comparing him to anyone else. I'm just comparing him to this class specifically. And I think why I think it's
we got to compare him what he will do in the NFL, not just versus his peers in this class.
But I think what we can take from right now, that's why I believe the NFL looks at Troy Franklin and says, man, all these other size, body, wide receivers, that's a bit underwhelming for them. That's essentially all I'm saying.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on Troy then, and that's okay though.
Once again, not changing.
Look, some people are going to.
Some people
it's going to be really, really important for them. I do believe that it will matter, but not to the point where Troy's going to be off people's boards.
No, I don't think that.
I don't think that boards. Xavier Worthy is now going to be the number 1 wide receiver in this class off the board because he tested the way he did.
Well, let's go into that then really quick. These 2 Texas wide receivers, Xavier Worthy 4.21, Adonai Mitchell 4.34. I personally believe they solidified themselves to be a first round wide receiver now. I think coming into this draft, we could have both said that Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, there was a 20% chance they'd go in the first round. Now it feels like an 80% chance that they go in the first round, which feels, once again, I feel like that percentage really solidifies themselves in that first back end of the NFL draft. Both of these guys ran phenomenally. Obviously, once again, 4.21 for Xavier, Adonai Mitchell 4.34. I think he is one of the most exciting players coming in, and I think he is somebody that has risen his stock significantly, of course, in the NFL Combine.
Yeah, for me, Adonai Mitchell had a more impressive day than Xavier Worthy. For him to run a 4.34 at 205, had a great explosion grade as well. All those are elite numbers. Xavier couldn't have done anything better. Great broad jump, great vertical. Broke the record for the 40-yard dash. Comes in at 165. I don't care. We've talked about this before. We do not care about size on this channel. That is completely fine. I love Xavier Worthy, but I'm not in on the notion that he is deserving of being right next to Rome Odunze. And that's what feels like most of the community is trying to convey now. Yeah, because he ran that time, because he broke the record, we got to put him right by Odunze. It's like, no, guys, you're taking 5%, 10% of what matters to a franchise and making that your determining factor. I couldn't get there personally. But again, depending on draft capital, any one of these names in tier 4 could be the number one guy in this tier for me. I also think that Ladd had a great day. Again, you put Ladd's time in last year's class, we're talking about it more. But it's just the fact that this class tested really well across the board. That doesn't mean this entire class is going to produce in the NFL. But they tested really well across the board that certain names aren't getting talked about enough. I think Ladd is one of those names. He looked really good in the drills as well. But phenomenal. I'm a huge fan of this entire tier. Jalen McMillan going under the radar, 9.33 RAS score, 4.47, a number I am super happy with personally. That 10-yard split is in the 90th percentile. I love his tempo in his routes. He is going to play out of the slot. I think he's going to stretch the field vertically, but mostly he will play out of the slot. He's very deceptive. He has a huge route tree, a ton of tricks in his bag. So I'm a big fan of Jalen McMillan, and he's probably my favorite sleeper in this class.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still on the same page with Jalen McMillan, but didn't change his stock in my personal opinion at the combine. So we'll have to wait and see what that draft. I think the biggest thing is draft capital for me now with Jalen McMillan. Didn't rise his stock, didn't affect his stock at the NFL Combine.
Yeah.
All right, tier 5. Take us through it.
Tier 5 is the biggest tier, and any one of these guys could find their way into tier 4 based off draft capital. It's a big tier. Let's talk about it. Jermaine Burton, Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, Roman Wilson, Malachi Corley, Slick Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, Tez Walker. Huge, huge tier.
Yeah.
I like all these players. I love some of them. And I believe any one of these names could produce. I've said Ricky Pearsall could be this year's Jaden Reed. I could totally see him being a second-round pick, producing day one. Roman Wilson, out of the slot, could produce for a team day one. Polk could be a great number 2. Legette has huge upside. Burton, similar to Ricky, I think could be this year's Jaden Reed. Keon has a clear, defined role, and Tez is just a great athlete, just needs to learn to catch the ball more consistently. This is a great tier. It's a huge, huge tier of names. Anyone you want to talk about specifically?
I think it's all upside tier. I'll just add to that. All these guys, I feel like any one of these guys can range from the second round to the 4th round of the NFL draft. All depends on of their draft capital, of course. I think the biggest one I always like to talk about is Keon Coleman. I wonder, let me ask you this. If you're a Keon Coleman believer, did this NFL draft or combine, change your opinion on Keon Coleman? Please put it down below in the chat, because it did change a lot. Not a lot. I think it did affect him personally at the NFL Combine. For Keon Coleman, ran the second slowest 40 amongst wide receivers at 4.61. Now his 10-yard split was still up there. Still a big size body wide receiver that we've seen, and had the highest speed in the gauntlet drills, which a lot of people were raving about. Which it was good. It was good to see that, but still doesn't change the fact that coming into this process early on in the offseason, that he was a top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken, in the NFL draft. And now I don't even think he's going to go in the top 35, 45, I would even say personally. I couldn't be way disrespecting him, but I think Keon Coleman, I would say, is the biggest adjuster for a lot of people coming out of the NFL Combine.
I say this as someone who was not on Keon Coleman consensus train early in December. I mean, you know this. But I don't want to be so opposite this entire video. I actually thought he had a really good combine. And I think it will probably have answered a lot of questions from NFL teams. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going in the first round, but I didn't think he would anyway. I mean, I think he's probably a lock for the top 45, top 50. But I actually thought he had one of the more impressive combines that wasn't talked about. Yeah, the 40-yard dash wasn't great, but the 10-yard split was 87th percentile. He can get off the line of scrimmage at least. Like, you can see that in his 10-yard split. Good explosion grade. He has the size. But more importantly, that gauntlet, you know, it was impressive. He, like you mentioned, was the fastest player in the gauntlet. You saw no hesitation when he was catching those balls straight down the line. Just kept going, really good. Strong hands. He looked really good. Confident in himself. Did not question the next catch. Did not question his hands, his ability to grasp the ball. That was super impressive to me. So, in my opinion, I actually think he showed he was a good athlete. I think he showed out in the drills, and I thought he had a more impressive combine than consensus.
Okay. And that this is what I want to know. I want to know that from the community. Once again, comment down below, because once again, a big wide receiver and player that I think we were very different and opposite when it was coming down into this off season here.
I said this a month ago, and I was kind of joking, but I said Keon Coleman might end up being a huge value in drafts. I don't know, dude. It just depends. It will blow me away if I end up being the Keon Coleman guy this draft. That would be insane from where we started.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll get there. Maybe I will if he goes to the perfect landing spot, but I still don't know what that perfect... I can't tell you what the perfect landing spot is. I can say he can go to one of these elite quarterbacks. I don't know if I'm still buying it personally. Yeah. So that is me. Twitter version of Tez Walker here.
Tez Walker had a great day. Didn't really answer any of the questions we had questions about, though. I mean, like, he 436 is a great number. 193. He tested well across the board. But our questions were really around his ability to actually be a good receiver, not an athlete. So I don't really feel like we answered any questions on that, but that's okay. You know, I was disappointed Malachi Corley didn't even show up. I don't know why. I don't understand why he didn't. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out more. I think Ricky Pearsall had one of the more underrated combines. I thought he was a good athlete. I didn't think he was that good. Again, that 4.41 number to me, I love that number. That's a great number in my opinion. Obviously, the 10-yard split isn't where you want it to be, but dude's a really good athlete. I thought he was a good athlete. I didn't think he was a great athlete, and I think he showed that at the combine. Yeah. I don't think he gets out of the second round personally. I think Polk had a fine day. You know, he didn't really disappoint by any means. I didn't think I expected him to run in the 4.4s, but he had a good day. I think he's a great complimentary wide receiver. I compare him to Romeo Doubs a lot. Leggett, your guy, I don't know if you want to say anything before we move on. He had a fine day.
Yeah, had a really fine day. Yeah, fine day. I personally think he, you know, how can I say this? I actually think he really helped himself. 4.39, big body wide receiver, 6'1", 221. 10-yard split was still there. 20-yard split is all there. I don't think he set himself apart, though. That is the only thing
I don't think so either.
I'm realizing. I think he tested really well, but
he had to test well, or it would have gone downhill.
Oh, 100%.
In that sense, it was good, but I don't know that he drastically raised the stock, in my opinion.
For me, I know a lot of people are off because he was a late breakout, but I think he is my first second tier wide receiver in this draft, if that makes any sense. If you look at that tier, you know,
tier 5 or tier,
I guess I would quote unquote consider tier 1 to tier 4, right? In my personal rankings, wide receiver ones with the quote, right? Wide receiver ones. And then you go to the tier 5 where all these guys have the ability to be wide receiver ones on teams if the situation's right. But Xavier Leggett is number 1 in that tier 2 for the wide receiver 2s, if that makes any sense, in tier 5. So
I get it.
Yeah, I think he's still up there. I think if he gets the landing spot that we're hoping for, that would be really exciting. And I think, once again, size, body, speed is all part of what Xavier Leggett does and what he brings, which is very, very exciting there. So
Yeah.
I love Xavier Leggett.
All right, deep sleepers: Javon Baker, Malik Washington, Jacob Coing. I love all three of these names. All three of these names, I think I'll have a lot of in the 4th round of rookie drafts. I think they all can compete for real roles that include a lot of production. I mean, Jacob Coing had ridiculous type of production.
Arizona,
now,
yeah.
he's one of those names who, like, people are going to look at, oh, he had a 6.05, so he disappointed at the combine. No, I don't think he did. I think he tested well. And I think, he's going to be a good player in the NFL. Malik Washington had a good day. 4.47 is a fine number for him. Javon Baker, I will say, like, I thought he was a better athlete than this. So in that sense, it's a little bit disappointing, but still one of my favorite deep sleepers in the class. And we'll see where he goes. But honestly, there's like 25 names I really like in this class. It's so deep. Every video we release, someone says, this guy's way too low. This guy, why do you hate this player? It's like, no, we love all these players. How do you rank them? It's difficult.
It is very difficult, and I think it's going to be a lot easier at the NFL draft. Let me tell you.
Yeah, big time.
What's crazy is that I would say from tier 5, like I mentioned already, all these guys have the opportunity to be the wide receiver 1. I think we all know who could be the wide receiver 1 out of this class, but the fact that we have 15 to 20 wide receivers there that have the opportunity to be wide receiver 1, I think is pretty phenomenal in how deep this class is going to be. So yeah, like I would definitely say that when it comes down to these guys. Love Jacob Cohen. Hopefully he does go to the great landing spot. I think he could be a phenomenal slot wide receiver.
I agree.
Had a decent 40 as well here. But yeah, that's about. Unless wide receivers to monitor, if you wanted to put that up here.
Yeah, Brendan Rice had a fine day. Johnny Wilson, Jamari Thrash, Taj Washington, Anaya Smith, all names to monitor. Mm-hmm. Johnny Wilson probably had the best day of any of those names. 98th percentile athlete in RAS's database. Great 10-yard split. 4.52 at 231. That's
6'6".
impressive.
So yeah,
I still think he should go to tight end, but that's fine. I could be wrong. But, better number 40-yard dash than Keon Coleman. I just think they're very different players. Even though Johnny is like a big body, I wouldn't say he's like a contested catch master or reliable hands or anything like that. So
I think when we're just comparing, when you're just comparing size with Keon Coleman to Johnny Wilson, it was like, well, like, you hoped Keon Coleman ran faster when you compare their size and weight versus Johnny Wilson. But yeah, like completely different athletes when they're on the field. So yeah, but
that's it though, guys. We appreciate you. Thanks for watching the video. Hit that like button. We'll see you in the next one. All up. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.